They were engaged, and some of the friends kidded her about Abe Lincoln. She said that she was going to marry a future president. It was womanly intuition that told her that this man, who still had something of the smell of the soil about him, was a future president. They were engaged, and 18 months later were married. They went to the Old Globe Tavern to begin their married life, where they paid $4 a week for room and board. Now we assume that must have been very good room and board, because Mrs. Lincoln was used to the best, and she was a very fastidious person. About this time, we have Lincoln elected to the National Congress as representative on the Whig ticket. He serves his 2 years. He learns his first lesson in national politics, then returns to Springfield to begin the longest period of law practice uninterrupted by politics in his entire career. He not only practices in his office in Springfield, but he rides the circuit, as they call it, throughout the center part of the state. He is retained by local lawyers because of his ability to handle juries. He's considered the finest trial lawyer in the state. He is also becoming an important corporation lawyer. And he has argued more cases before the Illinois Supreme Court than any other man of his period. Lincoln is drawn back into politics. For the second time, he is pitted against his old rival, Stephen A. Douglas, for a seat in the United States Senate. They arranged the Lincoln-Douglas debates because Douglas is advocating the extension of slavery into the territories of Kansas, Nebraska. Lincoln won the popular majority, but Douglas won the seat because the election really took place in the state legislature. The Lincoln-Douglas debates brought Lincoln national reputation. Who was this backwoods lawyer who had argued so brilliantly against the extension of slavery? He was invited east to lecture, and he was invited to the west. The following June, he is nominated for the presidency, and the following fall, he is elected. 8 states went out of the Union when they heard that Abe Lincoln of Illinois was president. He usually wore neckties. They were never straight. They were always crooked. During the 4 months as president-elect, we see a marked change in Lincoln's face. He begins to grow the Lincoln beard. We do not know why he adopted this style, but there is interesting correspondence on the subject. In the pile of mail coming into the president-elect, he saw one morning one envelope in childish handwriting. It was from a little girl by the name of Grace Bedell. She said she had seen his picture on the campaign posters and thought he'd be a great deal better looking if he wore some whiskers. He asked if he would have his little daughter answer it if he was too busy. He was so delighted with this childish frankness that he said he would answer it himself. He wrote to Grace saying that he was sorry that he didn't have a little daughter to answer her kind letter, but he had 3 fine boys. And conclusion, as for the whiskers, do you not think that my friends might consider them a silly affectation if I began wearing them now, since I've never worn them before? When that presidential special went through the little town of Westfield, New York, after making usual remarks from the rear platform of the train, Lincoln said, "I have a little correspondent in this town. I wonder if she's present." Grace Bedell was handed up to him. He took her in his big arms and kissed her, said, "See, Grace, I let the whiskers grow for you." Grace wriggled out of his arms as quickly as she could, ran home to tell her mother what had happened. She looked down at her hand, and there was the stem of the flower that she had expected to give to the president. It was a very bewhiskered gentleman that arrived in Washington early in February. The Confederacy had been formed. The country was disintegrating. In his inaugural address, Lincoln had appealed for a brotherly consideration of their mutual problems. It was answered 6 weeks later when the guns fired on Fort Sumter. Now, what would this guerrilla from Illinois do? That's what his own cabinet minister called him. He called for the 75,000 volunteers. The war was on. Now we see the history of the Civil War etched deeply into this face. Many blamed him for keeping the war going. The others blamed him for not making it go fast enough. Criticism of him was vitriolic. How can that man stand in the White House and crack jokes while the country is bleeding to death? They carped. Lincoln said, "What a strange fate it is for me, a man who never had the nerve to even kill a chicken, standing here, figuratively surrounded with blood." The lines grow deeper. Three long years, one general follows another, as one disaster follows another disaster for the northern armies. Then finally, out of the west, came that dogged scrapper, Ulysses S. Grant. He brought pressure all along the line. Lee, the brilliant Lee, could no longer shift his dwindling reserves from one front to meet the Yankees on the next front. Deeper grow the lines in this face, more hollow the cheeks. And then about this time, we have a marked change in his appearance. He changes his part to the right side. I don't suppose he did it just this way. But we have 3 profile pictures by Brady that show it parted from his right side over to the left. His hair is receding on his head. He has lost 20 pounds in this last 6 months of his spare 167. His beard is growing thinner too. Grant fought on month after month till Appomattox. The good news finally came. Lee had surrendered. The North was delirious with joy. Crowds trooped onto the White House grounds and demanded a speech. Lincoln came out reluctantly. He said he was not prepared to give them a speech. He thought all honor was due those brave officers and men who had had the harder part. Then, turning to the bandmaster, he said, "We have a new tune, one might say by the right of capture. It's one of the best tunes I ever heard. Will the band please play Dixie?" During the week of celebration, Mrs. Lincoln arranged a theater party. It was a tired old man that sat in the box that night at Ford Theater. His friends were worried about him. You know the rest of the story. You know how the assassin's bullet forever turned this face from us. But the spirit of Abraham Lincoln lives on. Wherever there's a struggle for human freedom, his deeds are remembered, his words are quoted. Let us be as determined as he was that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth.